So he targets U.S. aviation interests, and as an example, he was using everything. He was using aliases. He was using cover businesses. He was targeting universities. He started looking at identifying targets within U.S. aviation, and as an example, found a guy in GE Aviation. And what he would do is he would just say, look, can you come to China and make a presentation at the university about something completely innocuous, right? It's not classified by any means or whatever, but, you're so important and you're so smart. We'd love you to come over and present to our university. We'll pay your travel and a stipend. So they do that. So he starts doing this around 2013. Around 2017, they get this one GE aviation employee to travel to China and give a presentation. And by this time, luckily, the FBI had tweaked on this guy and figured out there was something wrong with him. So in cooperation with the company, the FBI started posing as him, right? Because Zhu's not having face-to-face meetings with this guy. He's doing this all online. So they start posing as this guy. After a year of just sort of random, non-threatening contact with this aviation employee, he starts asking him for specific details, right, of their engine technology. Right? And GE's got some incredible engine technology. And so the guy, with the cooperation of the FBI, sends a document. Right? And on the document, at part of it, it just says, you're not allowed to disclose this outside company. It's proprietary data. Well, what does that do? Well, the reason why they released that is because they wanted to set the hook on this guy, on this Chinese intel officer. And so he gets this and he goes, it's working. Right? He thinks, I got this guy now. I've tasked him with something that's actually interesting and important. He knows he's breaking a rule. He's given me this document. So now he accelerates the tasking a little bit. And he gets the guy to say, look, how about during one of your trips over to Europe, we meet. So this is where Zhu made his mistake. He goes to Belgium and gets arrested there. Right? And it took a while, but he was finally extradited to the U.S. and finally charged. But he was doing other things. He was the handler for a kid working as a student, came over here as a student visa in Chicago. Gave him targets, said, here are some individuals, again within aviation industry, said, I want you to start looking at them, and maybe some of them are interesting, and we might want to start developing some of these targets. Running this kid, who's living and working and studying in Chicago. And the targets were all of Chinese or Taiwanese descent, which is typical, right? They kind of hone in on that, And so eventually that kid got wrapped up. Once we started to figure out what was going on with Zhu, then obviously started to unravel his network. But this kid was also doing the same thing, was targeting under the direction of Zhu and the Chinese intel. Other things he did, again, I know I disappeared down a rabbit hole here, but to the point we made earlier in terms of operating in China, he was also targeting other countries. So he went after a French aviation company that had a facility in China. What does that mean? Well, that means that every employee, every local employee, is probably going to respond. If Zhu knocks on their door and says, I need your assistance, you're going to have to be my asset, they're probably going to say yes, right? Because they're operating there in China. Now they're working for a foreign company. But does that really matter when the Chinese regime knocks on your door? So they did. And what they did was, with the cooperation of this internal asset, they were able to place malware on a visiting Frenchman's computer with the hope of taking it back to France and then, affecting their entire system. So anyway, long story short, I guess the point of that exercise is the aggressiveness, right? The ability. You think about the years that they spend going after targets. And yet we want to believe somehow TikTok, that they're not going to touch that. Well, it's a lot of data there, but we're not going to go after TikTok data.
What kind of data do you think they're really accumulating? The thing that's disturbed me is that this discussion that they're getting biometric data, they're getting facial recognition data and fingerprint data from both, fingerprint readers from Android phones and biometric facial data from iPhone, the face opening thing. What are they doing with all that shit?
Well, some of it isn't of much use to them in the present time, right? But they don't care. So their ability, because of their resources and their motivation, is to just hoover up everything. And maybe there's no use for that biometric data right now, but maybe there will be. right? So maybe they're collecting all of this and they're thinking, okay, at some point we're going to develop a technology whereby we can use this for a reason. Maybe we can remotely, using facial recognition, unlock access to. Who knows? Just coming up with that. But the point at 30,000 feet is they don't really care. They hoover it all up, and then they look at it at some point and they say, okay, well, this can be used by Huawei, or this could be used over here, or our MSS or the State Security Service could use this. They'll figure out a use for it, and if it doesn't have a use, fine. It doesn't matter, right? They put it in a box and marked maybe, check back later, and maybe they will have a use for it. It sounds like it's one. I mean, we tend to not think in those terms. Everything we do tends to be targeted, right? So we'll say, this is our requirement. Let's go do that. The Chinese are they're looking 30 years, 40 years, 50 years down the road, and so. They've got a different approach to information collection, which is why a lot of companies get caught unawares because they think, I'm not doing shit. I'm just making a widget.
Right.
Why would they be interested in me? So, whatever. But, I realize people are saying, oh, God, he's fucking banging on about China again. But, if you think about it, we're all occupied with Russia and Ukraine right now. But China's the bigger issue, right, in the long term. And we just need to be able to multitask. And we got to worry about Russia-Ukraine conflict. And does that get out of control, or just where's it going? I guess that's a bigger question.
Where do you think it's going?
Yeah, I don't think anybody's got a plan in Washington right now, or in NATO. I don't think anybody knows. I think they're all being basically reactive, as opposed to, what's the end game here? What is the final way that we wrap this up? And I mean, look, the U.S. has spent, I don't know, as of the end of 2022, and that's almost a full year because it started in February. So almost in a full year, the U.S. spent about $50 billion in assistance, and about half of that is military aid, right, in a variety of forms, right? The HIMARS systems all the way to protective body armor, right? So it's all over the map, and training. If you compare that, $50 billion in aid and so what's that, about $25 billion in military aid. If you compare that to previous year or the year before, we were probably spending, on the Ukraine, $250, $270 million in military assistance. That's it, right? So that ramp up is incredible. And then that doesn't include what the EU's put into it, what the UK's put into it, and everything else.